Thanks for joining. Today's guest, I'm excited to introduce Oleg Ivanov. He's an executive director of Northern California for Stand With Us. Thank you for joining us, Oleg.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start with 67 questions rapid fire. Empathy or sympathy?
Empathy.
Any person alive or not would you like to have coffee with?
My grandfather, Isaac Kessel, who's not alive, unfortunately.
If not here, where would you like to live?
I love living in San Francisco, so I'm just going to go ahead and say this is the place I want to live.
Are you an introvert or extrovert?
Probably more of an introvert than an extrovert, although I think many people would be surprised to hear that.
What color will you paint a portrait of yourself?
Navy blue.
Best gift received?
Best gift received. Magan David necklace that my parents brought back for me from Israel.
Music you listen to often?
Classical, jazz, um, instrumental, piano music.
What will people be surprised to learn about you, other than being introvert or extrovert in your role?
They might be surprised to learn that Russian is my first language and that I didn't speak English until I was about 6 or 7.
One thing you can't live without?
My fiance.
What would you take on deserted island?
A e-reader with all of the world's books.
Biggest strength?
I would say putting things into perspective.
Pet peeve?
People who play their music loudly on public transportation instead of on headphones.
Guilty pleasure?
Watching American football on TV.
Describe yourself in 3 words.
Curious, engaged, and calm.
That was our end of our fire quick round.
Great.
Now we're on to questions that you can answer as long as you'd like. Do you have any memories of Odessa? You were born in Odessa, Ukraine, originally from. So, do you have any memories of Odessa?
Yes. So I was born in Odessa in 1985. We were in the Novi Bazar neighborhood. So I have some memories and recollections. I was about 4 when we came to America. So a lot of it is through stories and pictures. But I've also been back. I've spent a lot of time in Ukraine and in Odessa since we left. A lot of my work has been working with the Jewish community in the post-Soviet world in Eastern Europe. So I still have family there. I'm still in touch with people, uh, and I feel like people from Odessa are a specific and unique breed, and we recognize each other and we connect even when we're outside of Odessa. And so no matter wherever you go, if you're from there, you're always going to carry it with you.
Hopefully, it's the sense of humor and
Yes, that is
affinity for sense of humor and
absolutely
for terrific food got
yes,
passed on with your blood relatives onto
absolutely.
you. What did 10-year-old Oleg dream about?
10-year-old Oleg, wow. Probably going on the moon, um, hanging out with dinosaurs, being an explorer, traveling the high seas, seeing the world, um, trying to see and experience as much of the world as is out there.
Is it remain to be true to Oleg today? Some of these
Well,
qualities?
I've had a chance to do a lot of traveling in my life. I've been very lucky and privileged to be able to study abroad. A lot of my work has taken me to Jewish communities and other places all over the world. So I've been on, I want to say four continents. But my traveling is not done. It's going to continue, and so I'm definitely a lifelong traveler. I think that's an important way to engage with the world, to understand the world, to better understand our own place in it, and also to put things into perspective. I think, I think a lot of us are in a variety of ways stuck in our bubble and in our echo chambers, whether it's social media, whether it's just in our community and neighborhood. And while it's important to be grounded in where you are, I think it's also important to broaden your horizons however you can, and traveling is certainly one of the ways you can do that.
Was there one country that surprised you the most, that you expected one thing and it totally changed your mind in one way or the other?
Well, I would say not that it fully surprised me, but the first time I went to Israel, just that immediate feeling of coming home, of feeling like somehow I had been there, that I felt very connected to the land. The first time that I stepped off the plane and I was on Israeli soil, it was certainly a really emotional experience. Going to the Western Wall, going to the Old City in Jerusalem, it's a powerful experience. I think every Jewish person, one way or another, feels that they are connected with it. I mean, ultimately, this is where all Jewish people, one way or another, are from. People always ask me, like, "Oh, where are you from?" Or I'm on these Jewish diversity panels, and I say, "Look, in the diaspora where we ended up, we have been all over the world, but ultimately all of us trace our ethnic, religious, or cultural heritage back to Israel." And then the second answer I would say is Georgia, the country of Georgia, which I think is just maybe not on people's radars as much as it should be. Just a beautiful country in the Caucasus, also on the Black Sea. Wonderful people, friendly, great food, great wine. Very similar to Ukrainians, I would say. They love to have fun. They love to have a good time. They like to live for today. Israelis, of course, I would also put into that category.
Okay. Do you believe there's some truth in what is called immigrant mentality of overachievers?
Yes, I do think there's. I certainly think that immigrants experience the world and have different perspectives than people who grow up in the place where they end up. Um, I think so. Yes, the short answer is yes. The long answer is that, of course, depends on your specific immigrant experience, the specific person. I think one thing is that there's some utility in generalizing, but also I really try to honor and respect the individual. I think we all as individuals have our own strengths and weaknesses and passions and stories, and ultimately I don't believe in reducing people to certain large groups or categories.
Why political science major?
Political science. Yeah, I mean, so politics was a big conversation in my household growing up, politics and history. I think I was just very aware as someone who was really at the heart of some of the most important political events of the 20th century, the collapse of communism, the fall of the Berlin Wall, of the Iron Curtain, the massive migrations that took place at the end of the 20th century as a result of that, as the collapse of these communist regimes. I think I certainly can owe that to my parents, just being engaged, having these conversations, being curious, having history books in the house, having these discussions around identity and political ideology, and listening to a lot of political talk radio from across the spectrum growing up. When people listened to talk radio instead of podcasts, I have a very strong memory of that, being in the car with my dad, and that was, I would say, it's a lot of classical music we listened to, a lot of ABBA, and then a lot of political radio.
Did your family history prompt you to write a thesis on the plays of Mikhail Bulgakov?
Yeah, I would say, look, he's a Ukrainian writer, very important, one of the most important Ukrainian writers. I mean, he was someone who experienced firsthand, who was really at the heart of the communist revolution, the Russian Revolution, and Civil War. I think he was someone who really spoke to me from an early level, because he was someone who was censored by the regime, who was nevertheless did not let the regime silence him. He engaged in something that many Russian writers over the years and still today, unfortunately, engage in, which is writing for the desk. So, his most famous book, Master and Margarita, was really not written for publication, because he understood that in the Soviet Union, a book like this that was so satirical, that was so critical, that was so out of line with the socialist realism that was then de rigueur in the Soviet Union in the 30s and 40s, that this was not going to be published. But he wrote it anyway, because, even though he's not Jewish, I think that there's an important value there that he manifests in his writing, which is bearing witness, which is being writing down, expressing, keeping momentums of what you're going through, especially during times of tragedy and upheaval like he lived through. I love his satirical edge. I love his humorous voice. I think that he is someone who is both a very serious writer and a very funny writer. I think that's important. I think I've always been drawn to voices and writers and filmmakers and artists who can combine the tragic and the satirical, the dramatic and the comic. I think that's what life is. Life is a combination of all of these things. And I think the greatest artists capture this whole complex panoply of the human existence. I could keep going on and on and on. Of course, I wrote a master's dissertation about his work. And really, what that focused on was the way that writers navigate censorship regimes. And so, and I think what's important for him is his lesson continues to be relevant. Of course, it's not quite the same situation here in America, but as we've seen in mainstream media, on social media, especially with what's happened since October 7 to the Jewish community, where Jewish voices are being silenced, Jewish voices are being forced off of newspapers, from media organizations. Jewish stories are not being published by publishing houses or by film studios the way that they were before October 7th. So, again, while it's certainly not nearly as extreme as it was in the Soviet Union or in any totalitarian regime, I think we're seeing that this conversation of censorship, the artist's relationship with the government, with the, let's say, political orthodoxy of his time, this continues to be a vital and relevant conversation, especially for the Jewish community in America and elsewhere. I think things aren't as bad in America as they are elsewhere. But again, even though he's not a Jewish writer, I think a lot of his themes and experiences really resonate with Jewish audiences back then, today, and probably into the future.
Now I understand the bridge between political science and theater. Were you writing and adapting the plays or acting as well?
Yeah, so I was doing a lot of translation work. This was in my early 20s when I was involved in journalism. I was a theater and film critic. I was living in New York. I was, I've always kind of had two sides. I would say on the one hand, I have my political science, history, journalism side, and then on the other side, I have my creative itch and urges. So I'm someone who's written fiction, who's written poetry, who's done some translation work. So the specific connection there is that I was primarily working in the theater space on adapting and translating and updating Eastern European plays, Russian language plays for a modern audience in New York. So we got to translate and update some of these plays, introduce them to a new audience. Some of these works we would perform in Russian and in English. So that was a really great, unique experience. It was a way to sort of satisfy that hunger. But then eventually I pivoted. I went to grad school, eventually pivoted from there, and doing what I do now, which is Jewish advocacy work.
Right. Prompt me to the next question. When did you decide to join the philanthropic world supporting Jewish causes?
So I was someone that was really involved, I would say, as soon as I stepped on campus. So I did my undergraduate work at UCLA, and I'll never forget in 2003, on the first day of school at UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, I was walking down Bruin Walk, which is the main thoroughfare on campus, on my way to class. And the first thing I heard was, Antifada, Antifada, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. This is my first experience of my first day on campus in 2003. And really things have only gotten worse since then on campuses. And of course, as someone whose family experienced state-sponsored anti-Semitism, state-sponsored anti-Jewish discrimination in the Soviet Union, that had quotas in universities, that limited the amount of Jews that could go into universities. Certain professions were completely closed off to Jews. Something we can get into later is the way that anti-Zionism hurts not only Jews but societies as a whole. So my father, who's not Jewish, he at one point applied for a job in Soviet intelligence and was told that he would never be trusted with such a position because his wife was Jewish. So this is a way that anti-Zionism in particular really reaches beyond the Jewish community, and it corrupts society, it erodes it from within, it creates mistrust, it creates conspiracy mindsets, it creates a scapegoat mentality. Coming as someone who fled this, I mean, our family were stateless religious refugees. We fled this to come to America because this was a place where this kind of discrimination wasn't happening. And it was really when I got to college that I realized that, unfortunately, this happens here as well. Certainly not on the same scale, but I would say in academia, this is really ground zero for this kind of discrimination, especially against pro-Israel voices. But really, there's always been an on and off fluctuating effort to silence Jewish voices, to keep Jews out of universities. If you follow kind of the history of Jew hatred, you could see that in the history of America, even we've seen that Jews have been prevented from going to universities on the grounds of their religion, on the grounds of their race, and now on the grounds of their ancestral connection to the Jewish homeland of Israel, which manifests today as anti-Zionism. I would say that's the main way that Jew hatred manifests today. And I experienced that on day one. But I would also say that at the same time, there were tables there on Bruin Walk for organizations like Stand With Us, other Jewish organizations, pro-Israel organizations. So I think that's when I really got involved and engaged. And so I was involved with Jewish activism and pro-Israel activity on campus. I was at UCLA at the same time as Ben Shapiro, so this kind of gives you a sense of what the situation there was like, what the community was like. And I think like anti-Semitism historically, there's two faces to it. On the one hand, obviously, there's the negative face of discrimination, of spreading hatred, of spreading vitriol, again, specifically against the Jewish community. But also it causes Jews to be self-reliant, to find our community, it'll toughen you up. You're kind of being forged in the fire, so to speak. I mean, it's really a crucible for Jews. And I think, now we're seeing this kind of anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist activity more in high schools as well. This is a slightly newer phenomenon, but it's been the case on college campuses for a long time. And I think like a lot of Jews in America, that's really when I started to get very involved with volunteer work, volunteering for Jewish organizations, already when I was in college and immediately after college, I was volunteering with Jewish organizations like the World Jewish Congress, like the Joint Distribution Committee, and eventually I made the switch from volunteer to professional staff.
Stand With Us is an organization known for combating or educating on anti Semitism support for the state of Israel. Where and how did it start? Can you give me a little bit of history from the
Sure. So
beginning?
Stand With Us started 25 years ago. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. It was started in Los Angeles by um, Roz and Jerry Rothstein and Esther Renzer. It was just started in a living room, and basically the idea was that these people and their friends, they saw that there was a gap in Jewish advocacy in America when it came to fighting anti-Israel efforts on college campuses. So specifically anti-BDS efforts. So BDS, which stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Against Israel, we really saw this starting to accelerate at the beginning of the 21st century. After 9/11, this was during the time of the Second Intifada in Israel, when there was a lot of terrorist activity there. And we saw at the same time that this was also when on college campuses you really started to see these anti-Israel efforts ramped up from the student government, pressure from the outside against these universities in terms of their Israel exchange programs or study abroad programs in Israel, or partnership with Israeli universities, or investment in Israeli organizations or companies that work in or invest in Israel. So this was really the focus, was really to push back against these efforts on college campuses and to support Jewish students on college campuses, because there was really a sense that the legacy Jewish organizations were not doing anything or not doing enough to really focus on that and to support Jewish students. So we really got started to support Jewish students on college campuses in these pro-Israel efforts. Eventually, there was a realization that, well, by college, it's already too late. We're already seeing this in high schools now. So then we launched a high school department in addition to the campus department. Eventually, there's a realization that this is happening as early as middle school, that we were seeing these anti-Israel indoctrination efforts in middle schools. I mean, there were these programs where these groups would take American middle schoolers to Gaza and Judea and Samaria to meet with terrorist organizations, to indoctrinate them. And these were, in many cases, American public school students. And so eventually we broadened our work to include all of K through 12. Really, the educational space is still our bread and butter. We're an Israel education organization dedicated to educating about Israel, fighting anti-Semitism. And of course, as our work has grown, we expanded out of Los Angeles into Northern California, into the rest of the country. I run the Northern California office. We have regional offices all across the country, but we're an international organization at this point. So we also have national offices in Canada, Argentina, Brazil, South Africa, Australia, the Netherlands, the UK, and Israel, and we're growing. So we're an international organization at this point. Many people know us through our social media presence. We have the second largest social media presence of any Jewish organization after the IDF. We've reached billions of people across many different languages, across all of our social media platforms since October 7. We're a 21st century organization. We're still really a young organization. And I think because so much of our work is so grounded in supporting students, working with students and young people, we really, I think, have our finger on the pulse, and we're a flexible organization that's able to adapt and respond to the changing threat of anti-Semitism in a really flexible kind of way, while still being rigorous in a way that I think, unfortunately, other Jewish organizations, especially some of these legacy organizations, have a harder time adapting as quickly as we can. We also do work in Holocaust education, because that's also vital. But also many people we see are now hijacking the story of the Holocaust, something called Holocaust inversion, where they're using it now to attack Israel. to attack the Jewish people, in fact. And of course, this is something that you and I know about because in the Soviet Union, you couldn't officially recognize the Holocaust. There was a policy under Stalin, which was then perpetuated after him, of do not divide the dead. So because, of course, the Soviet Union bore the brunt of the casualties of World War II, of course, the Nazi invasion, of course, Soviet POWs, Soviet citizens of all ethnicities and religions suffered under the Nazi invasion, but also under the Soviet government. I mean, the Soviet government was also ethnically cleansing, deporting, murdering its own people while it was fighting the Nazi invasion. And this includes Jews. I mean, there were anti-Semitic campaigns being carried out by the Soviet government during World War II, while the Nazi invasion was happening as well. And so, for a variety of reasons, which we can maybe get into later, the Soviet Union did not acknowledge specifically the Holocaust, the burden that the Jewish community of the Soviet Union bore during the war effort against the Nazis. And so, as someone who understands how fragile Holocaust memory is, especially now that really the last generation of Holocaust survivors is dwindling, they'll be gone in the next few years, as well as the righteous among the nations. I think there's only something like 60 righteous among the nations who are still left. These are people who were recognized by the state of Israel for saving Jewish lives during the Holocaust. And so Holocaust memory is really as important as ever, especially as we're losing these voices. And our legal team is growing, our legal efforts. We're engaged in litigation. We have a pro bono network of hundreds of lawyers across the country who are working with parents, students, community members, people who are experiencing anti-Semitism in the workplace. And we're getting a lot of legal wins, and that's also really making a difference. And it's also really reversing a lot of the anti-Semitism that we've seen coming to the surface, especially after October 7th, especially on college campuses, especially in K through 12. We've had a lot of victories in high schools, high school districts, universities, where we've been able to push back the tide as a result of these legal advocacy efforts.
In today's reality, after October 7th, what is your main focus? What are your short-term and long-term goals?
So I would say the main focus is really making sure that we are building today's proud Jewish Zionist leaders to be the leaders for tomorrow. So this is really guaranteeing a proud Jewish Zionist future in America, but really across the world. People ask me all the time, should American Jews have an exit plan? When will we know when it's time to go? I'm a refugee. Even many American Jews here who have been here for decades now have some kind of connection with the Holocaust. Many of their family members fled the Holocaust. In fact, it's the reason that they're here or in Israel or elsewhere in many cases, because they did flee. They knew when it was time to leave, unlike the Jews who stayed behind, who were victims of the Holocaust. And, something I tell them is, first off, I think America is different. I can tell you I love America as only an immigrant can. I do think America is different. America has never been based on a ruling or dominant ethnic or religious group, which I think has always guaranteed freedoms for its religious ethnic minorities. But, I also tell people, listen, Plan B is Israel. And so, Plan A is, of course, fighting anti-Semitism here, guaranteeing a Jewish future here, guaranteeing a proud and strong Zionist identity and presence in America, continuing to have a strong American-Israeli bilateral relationship. But then also it's guaranteeing that Israel thrives, succeeds, is strong. Because if worse comes to worse, knock on wood, that's Plan B for Jews around the world. And so, regardless, the main thing we should be doing is teaching our young Jewish people to have pride in their Jewish heritage, in their Jewish identity, and that involves having a strong Zionist identity. I mean, Israel is at the heart of the Jewish experience. It's where our culture comes from. the Hebrew language, which is of course both the language of our religious texts, but then also the everyday language spoken in Israel now. It's where our traditions, our holidays, our liturgy, our practices come from. There's no separating Israel from Jewish identity. And so that's really the focus of what we do, I would say, in a broad way. And, you know, in the shorter term, it's fighting these anti-Israel efforts. It's fighting these efforts to demonize and marginalize Jews, Israelis, Zionists in America. You know, again, part of this also is that, of course, 20, you know, over 20% of Israelis are now Jewish. Israel has the only growing Christian minority in the Middle East. Almost 20% of Israel is Muslim. And so these people are also Israelis, Zionists. So, you know, when Hamas attacked Israel on October 7, they also murdered Muslims, Arab Israelis, Christians, um, foreign workers, a lot of foreign workers, especially from Southeast Asia. So, you know, this was an attack not just on the Jews, but this was really an attack on the multi-ethnic, multi-religious democracy that Israel is and represents. It's the only multi-ethnic, multi-religious democracy in the Middle East. And so, you know, that's something that we have to remind people. And so this effort, it's not just, you know, this effort to fight anti-Semitism, it's not just for the Jewish people. It's really a fight for democracy, for the strength of our democratic values in this republic. It's for minority rights, because Jewish rights are minority rights. Jewish safety is minority safety. If Jews are unsafe, other minorities are unsafe as well. And so this is the focus of our work, to make sure that these efforts, these anti-Israel, anti-Semitic efforts, fail. We're seeing them in the schools, city councils, at the county level, at the state level, at the national level, at international organizations that try to demonize and ostracize Israel, whether it's on a political level, economically, or whether it's boycotting Israeli institutions, companies. So, you know, we, broadly speaking, you know, that's on the macro, and on the micro level is really standing up for Jewish rights, standing up for Israel, for Israelis, for Zionists, making sure that our voices are heard and that we're not ostracized from these communities and these spaces.
Aside from great, that's how I found, and I'm not a social media, but you know, I found a lot of videos popping everywhere about from the or by the organization. Aside from that, what are the is it volunteer based organization? Do you have volunteer? I heard about the attorneys and lawyer pro bono, but other than that, somebody's recording, somebody is you know going to campuses. How what is the model here?
So we have full-time professional staff. I'm the executive director for Northern California. We have national staff. So we have our national directors of our campus team, our high school team, Holocaust Education Center. We have our C-suite, and then we have our regional directors like myself. Then we also have regional managers for campus and for high school. So this is also staff, and they're the ones who are working with students and parents in high schools, on college campuses. We have robust student leadership programs. These are really our flagship leadership programs at both the campus level and the high school level. So these are basically paid internships that students apply for. It's not just Jewish students. We have Christian, Hindu, Muslim students who have been a part of these leadership training programs as well. And we're investing in them because they are already leaders in their communities, in their high schools, in their universities, but also we know we're investing in them as the leaders of the Jewish community for the future as well. So these are kind of our boots on the ground, especially in high schools and on campuses. And then we have advisory boards. Many of our regions have advisory boards. I have an advisory board, which is made up of community members, parents, people who are invested in this work. All of our donors are community members. So we don't accept any money from any government, including the Israeli government or the US government. So this is, we're all funded by community members, by private donors. So a big part of course, my work and our work is continuing to make sure that we are raising those funds to do the work that we're doing. And then also there's a lot of different ways for community members to get involved with us. People host salons for us. We're always bringing in speakers, speaker panels, experts, movie screenings, cultural celebrations. And so we partner with synagogues, with JCCs, with other ethnic and religious community groups to bring this kind of work to the community. So for that kind of work, we rely on our community members to build these relationships, to open these doors for us, to be our partners that are putting these programs together, spreading the word. And of course, when it comes to our social media, we rely on our fans and our subscribers to share the material, to make sure that the right people are seeing it, to change hearts and minds, and really to make a dent in the poison that's spreading across the world, this ancient hatred of anti-Semitism, which today is primarily disguised as anti-Zionism, because again, it corrodes society, it erodes democratic institutions from within. And as we've seen in every country around the world that has engaged in this kind of anti-Semitic scapegoating, it's always the country that ends up suffering from this as well. It's not just the Jewish people. You look at all of these authoritarian regimes, these dictatorships that made anti-Semitism state policy. I mean, obviously the Nazi regime, the Soviet regime, authoritarian governments throughout history, and we see that eventually it erodes these countries from within also. So yeah, and we have a lot of our partners and supporters are non-Jewish allies, which is so vital in the work that we do. Just here alone in Northern California, we regularly bring speakers who are Arab, Muslim allies who work on Muslim-Jewish dialogue, Arab-Israeli peace efforts, expanding the Abraham Accords. But also we do a lot of work with our allies in again, other faith and ethnic communities, because also on a local level, on a community level, a lot of the work we do is focusing on making sure that our communities and our communal spaces and our schools are welcoming and safe to all. Because this is a big part of our work, and this is why we partner with other faith and ethnic groups on this work we do.
If my son or daughter or my brother's daughter is walking to the campus today, their kids are about to go back to school, freshmen, and they see the chants, I don't want to repeat the chants, and they see the flags, and they see keffiyeh reps, what are they supposed to do? They don't know. They're not prepared. They don't know anything about Stand With Us. They're from Jewish. They happen to be maybe mother Jew, father. It doesn't. They're Jewish, but they're not rooted in their Jewish identity, so to speak. Yet something, part of them, still is unsettled inside. Seeing that, understanding that there's something wrong with that picture. What would you tell them?
So first off, I mean, in that specific situation, the first thing they can and should do is reach out to Stand With Us. I mean, we are here. We have a campus team that is specifically dedicated to supporting Jewish students, finding peers for them, connecting them with other Jewish students who have similar concerns, similar experiences. They're not alone. So it's important that we build community. Every year we have two conferences. We have a student conference and an international conference. And in both of these, we are bringing hundreds of Jewish students from all over the world to come together who are having the same experiences, have the same frustrations, the same challenges, so that they can come together, so that they can see that they're not alone, that they have friends and partners and peers from all over the world who are experiencing this, who are fighting back, who are winning, who are standing up, proud, strong in their identities, who won't be pushed around, who are going to push back, who are going to make their voices heard. So I would say the first thing is just letting them know that they're not alone, to connect them with that community. Then we have lots of resources, whether it's pamphlets, whether it's educational material, whether it's legal support, if they feel like they're being discriminated against. All of these resources are available to them for free. And I think this is really something that sets Stand With Us apart from other Jewish organizations is, the social media, the student leadership programs, the legal work. It's all in-house. It's all in one place. You can find it here. Of course, we partner with other Jewish organizations on a lot of the work we do, but you can find all of that in-house. So I would say the first thing they should do is reach out to us. The second thing they should do is find the Jewish groups that are already existing on campus. Find the pro-Israel groups that are there. In rare cases, there won't be any, or there will be few. But in most cases, at least in America, there's going to be some kind of organized Jewish presence there. So to connect with those people. And then I would also say that, we do see this, and one way to avoid this is for parents and students to get involved at a younger level. I mean, I think one of the challenges that the Jewish community has seen and learned from, and it's starting to change its behavior a little bit, is that for many years, the Jewish community didn't want to confront the situation in Israel, in Gaza, Islamic anti-Semitism, far left, progressive anti-Semitism. They didn't want to touch this. It was too uncomfortable. Synagogues, JCCs, Jewish communities, they didn't know how to have these conversations. So they just didn't. What did that do? It created a vacuum. So now these Jewish kids, these Jewish students, many of whom go to Jewish schools, they go to, they're involved in synagogues. They've had bar and bat mitzvahs, but they've never had those serious conversations, that serious preparation for understanding the history of Israel, the importance of it to the Jewish people, both historically and today. And because of that, then they go into colleges, but even increasingly high schools, and they're confronted with these lies, with these fabrications, with disinformation, with misinformation, oftentimes now from teachers, from the teachers' unions, from admins, and of course from their fellow students, especially with the way that it's exploded on social media. And so the fact that so many young people are getting their information, I'm using air quotes, from social media, which is in reality disinformation, or misinformation. And so if they're not prepared, they're not going to know how to respond to this. And so this is where organizations like Stand With Us are so important, and why we are trying to and succeeding in reaching so many young Jewish people, so that when they're entering these spaces, they're prepared, they're ready, they're confident, they're going to have these conversations. And if they're being discriminated against, they're going to recognize it and they're going to push back. They're not going to stand for it.
Is it as bad on college campuses throughout the world? I mean, for example, Ukraine, I'm always curious at that going on with that conflict. And I understand Europe is as bad as it's here. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked for several Jewish organizations, many of which have a global presence. So I'm somewhat plugged into these other communities. I have some sense of this. Now, I am not on the ground in Ukraine. I'm not on the ground in Chile or Australia. So I'm not an expert on these issues. I can tell you with some confidence what's happening in Northern California. With a similar amount of confidence of what's happening in the U.S. Each of these countries is different. And also, these things are changing all the time. So let's kind of talk in general terms. I would say, on the whole, in America, it's still better. I mean, after Israel, obviously Israel is, the best place still to be a Jewish student, a Zionist student. After Israel, I would say America is still one of the best, if not the best places to go to university for a Jewish student in terms of the amount of discrimination they're going to face. I still think it's much less than it is. I mean, look, like, almost 1 million Jews were forced out of Middle Eastern countries around 1948 and after, right? So obviously, when you're talking about the countries of the Middle and Near East, Jews are not even allowed to exist in some of these countries, right? And then when you look at Western Europe, I would say things are worse there than they are here. I think they've been trending in that direction for a lot longer. The problem of anti-Zionism has sort of hit there. It hit there earlier and it hit there stronger than it did here. I would say in Canada, it's worse than it is here. I would say in Latin America, things are pretty bad. I would say in Eastern Europe and in countries of the former Soviet Union, anti-Zionism is hardly an issue at all. And one of the reasons I think this is true is because the Soviet totalitarian government scapegoated the Jews for certainly the second half of its existence, but really for much of its existence, for much of its 70-year existence. And so people were force-fed this garbage, this nonsense, these idiotic lies that Zionists were somehow responsible for food shortages or for, the incompetence of the government, when of course it was a horrible, idiotic political economic system that has never worked, which was at fault. It was these corrupt leaders, these corrupt leaders that cared more about their own succession and their own well-being than they did about the citizens, who they were happy to to murder and put millions of their own citizens into gulags and concentration camps, to execute with no trials. And so, but again, this is the classic anti-Semitic move. They scapegoated the Jews. After World War II, it was not PC anymore to scapegoat the Jews, so they decided to call Jews Zionists. And so now they were scapegoating the Jews under the guise of fighting the quote-unquote Zionists. And so because of that, I think many citizens there, especially those who grew up with it, are immune to this kind of anti-Zionist propaganda because they lived under it. They know firsthand that this is not true, that whatever their problems may or may not be, it's not because of the Jews, it's not because of Zionists, it's not because of Israel. So I think in that sense, when you look at places like Ukraine, the Baltic countries, things are certainly not as bad there. I think, look, you still have some traditional anti-Semitism based in Christian anti-Semitism, and racial anti-Semitism. Obviously, you're seeing it a little bit more now with the younger generation who's getting the same misinformation from social media. You get it a little bit more from, I would say, some of the older generation who, those who were under Nazi occupation, those who fell for Nazi anti-Semitic propaganda. But I would say it's on the whole better there than it is in Western Europe. But also, countries are changing. I mean, you look at the Arab and Muslim countries that have signed the Abraham Accords, which have extended the circle of peace between Israel and the Arab and Muslim worlds. And some of these countries, the UAE now is not sending its students to study in England because they're afraid that they will be radicalized in England. This is something that people in America need to understand. These Muslim and Arab countries understand that anti-Zionism is a corrosive ideology that will destroy their own societies, and they're fighting back against it. They're changing their curriculums to remove the anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist elements of it that were there for many years. They understand that Israel is a peace partner, it's an economic partner, it's a strategic partner in the Middle East. And so at this point, you have these Muslim and Arab countries who are worried that their students will become radicalized into political Islamism, radical Islam in Western Europe, that they're much more vulnerable to that in Western Europe than they are in the Arab and Muslim countries. So I think this should really open people's eyes. I think not enough people understand this when it comes to these conversations. Not enough people know that in this latest conflict between Iran and Israel, that Iran attacked more Arab and Muslim countries than Israel ever has. I think many of these, again, Muslim and Arab countries that are looking to the future, they see that Israel is the future, not Iran, not these jihadists, not the radical Muslims, not the Houthis, not Hezbollah, not Hamas, not the Muslim Brotherhood, which is destabilizing all of these countries. And so I would say it's a mixed bag, but on the whole, America is still one of the best places for a Jewish student to go to university. But then also, even within America, there are better and worse places to go to school. While obviously some universities have really struggled with containing anti-Semitic expression from their faculty, from their students, other universities have gone the other direction and really made efforts to make their environment more welcoming to Jewish and Israeli students.
Thank you. We conclude a few questions. Are there any past or present leader that influenced your philosophy and leadership style?
I mean, certainly, I look at the great Jewish leaders in our own history. I look at Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern political Zionism. I think of Zeb Jabotinsky, a great Odessan Jew, also a writer and journalist like myself, someone who was unapologetic in his Zionism and his Jewish pride, but also understood that Jews will not win their freedom alone through words and through negotiation and through diplomacy, that they also have to fight and to struggle for their rights. So these are two people that come to mind. Someone like Golda Meir, also fellow Ukrainian Jew, someone who is I quote on an almost daily basis for her wisdom and her foresight and her demeanor, her understanding, but also her toughness. Those are just three of many, many examples. I could keep going on and on and on, but I think that that's a good start.
What's your present state of mind?
Well, I would say that it's been very important for me, especially since October 7th, to limit my engagement with social media for my own mental health. I recommend that to everyone out there as well. Go into your community. Social media is being bombarded and monopolized by bots, by trolls. Um, 1/4 of the people that you're interacting with on social media are bots. They're not real people. Now, with AI taking over, it's AI talking to AI, influencing AI models. So I think that social media can give you such a distorted view of the world, and it can also make it seem much worse for the Jewish community than it actually is. Go out into your community, engage where you are, feel the sun on your face, touch the grass. So I've been doing that, and also I've been practicing gratitude for just being grateful for what I have, for being in this country where we still have freedom, we still have the tools for advocacy, to push back against anti-Semitism and other forms of discrimination. I'm grateful for my fiance, my family, the ability to see them, to spend time with them, my friends and family, for the work that I get to do, which I think is holy and sacred work, for working for a great organization, for our thoughtful leadership. I would say that I'm in, it's, I recognize and I am not naive about the problems that we are facing, but as Golda Meir said, Jews don't have the luxury of pessimism. So I go out there every day, and I'm grateful that I get to make a difference every day in this fight against anti-Semitism, in the fight for Israel's security and success. And so for that, I am grateful. I am happy. It is Shabbat here in a few hours. My fiance and I, we're gonna light the candles. We're gonna say the Shabbat prayers. We're gonna have a nice Shabbat meal, and that's something that Jews haven't always been able to do through our history. So I'm grateful that I live in a place and at a time where we can do that and where we can express ourselves and live openly and proudly.
Any advice to your 20-year-old self?
Advice to my 20-year-old self. Yes, I would have said to my 20-year-old self that you should pick up playing the piano again, and that you should invest more in Jewish history, Jewish textbooks, our Jewish holy works, and also learning foreign languages. It's never a bad thing to learn as many languages as you can. So that would be some of the advice I would give to him.
Any fears?
Um, One of my favorite all-time shows is the show Twin Peaks, and there's a character at one point who says that my greatest fear is the possibility that love is not enough. And so I'm gonna say that is my fear as well.
Regrets?
Je ne regrette rien.
What brings you the biggest joy in life?
Um, it has to be your loved ones, your friends, your family, your romantic partners. That's the basis for everything. It's I remember that an ally at one of our joint events once said that if you don't have your personal life, your life at home in order, if it's not bringing you joy, if it's not bringing you peace, then it's going to be much harder to bring joy and bring peace and bring this kind of order to the outside world. And so I think we all need to prioritize that level of our relationships, that level of our existence, because if we don't have that, then everything else becomes much, much more difficult.
What keeps you up at night?
Um, Missed opportunities. There's it's a great big rich world. There's a lot of opportunities out there to to make sure that we are living in a safe, thriving democracy. There's a lot of interpersonal opportunities. There's a lot of public opportunities, political opportunities. So I think just the idea that I'm only one man and I'm trying to do as much as I can, but we need more people to do this work, to build these relationships, to do the outreach, to be the boots on the ground, to be engaging with their elected officials, their neighbors, leaders from other ethnic and religious groups. So just that these opportunities are out there. We have friends. The Jewish community has more friends than I think we realize. But, I think in some ways the biggest problem is that there just aren't enough of us doing this outreach and securing these allyships.
Greatest achievement?
Oh, my greatest achievement. Well, hopefully it's yet to come. But I will say, look, I think being an openly Zionist PhD student on American university campuses is not the easiest thing, especially when your dissertation is about fighting and recognizing anti-Zionism, especially when it's about fighting and recognizing progressive anti-Zionism, which I think has really, unfortunately, captured a lot of social science, humanities, liberal arts faculties and departments across the U.S. So being able to finish my PhD, which is on the history and dissemination of Soviet anti-Zionism, being able to go through all the hurdles, all the roadblocks that were put in my way that would not have been put in the way of somebody else who was working on a different subject. I think it took perseverance and fortitude, and so it's definitely something I'm proud of.
Who or what makes you laugh?
Oh boy, well, I love stand-up comedy. I love the great comedic writers. I mean, certainly Philip Roth makes me laugh. Seinfeld, Larry David, the Marx Brothers. Just to name some humorous Jewish voices. Dave Attell is a great Jewish comedian who I love. And
You're
as
way
an
too young to
Odessan,
remember Marx Brothers.
I'm sorry, I
You're
didn't catch
way
that.
too young to remember the Marx Brothers.
Well, I'm as someone who is a film critic for many years and a movie buff, I love the Marx Brothers. Duck Soup, if no one has seen it, is really one of the great Jewish films. It's one of the great anti-totalitarian satires. Also, of course, Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator. Charlie Chaplin was not Jewish, but when he was quote unquote accused of being Jewish, he responded that he didn't have that honor, unfortunately. So he was definitely an ally, someone who was Jewish adjacent. And so these are two great Jewish anti-totalitarian films that I recommend to people if they haven't seen them: Duck Soup and The Great Dictator.
The last question I ask all my guests: what do you find extraordinary in every day?
I mean, just hearing the bird song outside my window, seeing the bees outside when I'm in the backyard reading or working, seeing them going about their business, continuing the cycle of nature, the cycle of life. That gives me a lot of confidence in the continuity of our existence, nature, but also Jewish continuity. It's a great symbol and metaphor. is that the birds and the bees, they go to work and they do this every day. And that's what we have to do also. We have to just put our nose to the grindstone and just, do this work, show up in our communities, do the work, speak out, speak up, because nobody else will. But also we've been doing this for over 3,000 years, and I think we're going to be doing it for thousands of years more.
Oleg, thank you for this meaningful conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.